In flow, we see 5 of the most potent reward chemicals the body and brain can produce all flood our system at once. And they're performance enhancers and they're pleasure chemicals. And you're familiar with some of dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, anandamide, endorphins. And when we talk about flow underpinning happiness and well-being and meaning and purpose and joy and all that stuff, these neurochemicals are a large reason why. Just to give you an idea of pleasure-wise, okay? So when we fall in love, which is one of the best feelings on earth, that feeling of romantic love is dopamine and norepinephrine being cocktailed. It's 2 out of these 5 chemicals. So imagine like falling in love plus a whole lot more pleasure, that gets you flow. So that's why when people, rate their favorite experiences on earth, it's always a flow state. These neurochemicals are why. That's why we see this enormous surge in motivation. When McKinsey, the business consultancy, wanted to know how much more productive top executives were in flow than out of flow, they did a 10-year study, and the average response was 500% more productive, which is crazy, right? It means you can go to work on Monday in flow, take Tuesday through Friday off, and get as much done as your steady state peers. Which also tells you at the Flow Research Collective, my organization, right, we train a lot of companies. That's one of the reasons why, right? Because more and more companies are doing this, and you've got to stop, and you're like, well, if company A does this and they're 1,000% more productive than the competition because their employees are now being able to spend a couple days a week in flow versus the comp, right? This is becoming one of those factors in business where you have to do it kind of thing. You also see these same neurochemicals impact learning and memory. So quick shorthand, how does learning and memory work in the brain? More neurochemicals that showed up during experience, better chance to move from short-term holding into long-term storage. Another thing neurochemicals do, they tag experiences. Super important, save for later, right? Flow is this huge dump. Neurochemistry, which is why in studies done by the U.S. Defense Department, soldiers in flow learn 240 to 500% faster than normal. Huge spike in learning and memory. All that comes down to these really big surge of neurochemicals. We also see stress hormones and stress chemicals flush out of our system as we move into flow. It resets the nervous system, which has, we're going to talk about peak performance aging as we go on in our country. So there are 9 known causes of aging, and they're all linked to stress and inflammation. So flow is a very potent anti-aging medicine, maybe one of the most potent. One of the reasons is because it flushes these stress hormones out of our system and resets the nervous system, and that anything that does that, anything that resets the nervous system is essentially an anti-aging technology. The last thing we want to talk about is brain waves. So when you and I are in conversation, you're awake, alert, we're talking, your brain is producing a beta wave. It's a fast-moving wave. Awake and alert is what it basically means. Below that's a slightly slower wave, that's an alpha wave. This is daydreaming mode. It's basically when the brain is inactive, its stuff is shut down, it's a slower wave. And then below that is theta. Theta is a much slower wave, tends to show up during REM sleep or sometimes during focused attention, which is why you see it so much in flow. Flow takes place on the borderline between alpha and theta. We don't stay there permanently. You're not living there. Every time you make a decision, and flow is a decision-making state, you'll bounce around. You'll go up to beta, you'll come. But the difference, like between peak performers, when you look at what is the difference in the brain between peak performers and average people when they're doing something, one of it is average folks will go into a decision-making cycle, and they'll go to beta or high beta or some of these like non-flowy brainwave states, and they'll get stuck there. They'll stay there. High beta is anxiety. So like your brain will start worrying about something and you'll just stay there. But the pros, they may start worrying about it, but they'll get their brain back to this alpha theta borderline. They can come back to flow.